could our candidate for VPOF, could you introduce yourself, tell us your name, your program, and your year?
Of course, thank you so much. Hey everybody, I'm Matthew. I'm studying computer science and math here at Waterloo, and I'm studying business down the street at Laurier. I'm running here to be your VPOF candidate.
All right. Well, could you tell us why you chose to run for this position and what experience and skills you think you bring to this role?
Thanks so much. I'm running for VPOF because it's the next stage of involvement that I can pursue at WUSA to support the organization that I care a lot about. I've spent a lot of my time here at university getting involved in student societies, first in a bunch of roles at MathSoc before I'm sort of moving up to WUSA. And I've loved every second of it. It's been some hard work, but I've loved it the whole time. At MathSoc, I learned a lot about, what these student studies take, what kind of work they do and what it takes to make them succeed. And then moving up to WUSA, I got involved in governance, in advocacy, and also in our budgets and appropriation committees. So I know a lot about how the background of these finances work as well. So I'm very excited to be able to bring sort of my experiences to that and focus on the things that I think that this organization can really use to help and support our students even more through this pandemic and beyond.
Wonderful. What are the biggest issues you see on campus?
So I think that our campus has a number of places where we can improve, and there's a lot of work to be done. And that stretches not only through my portfolio as a VPOF, but all the portfolios of the fellow executives, including all the candidates that I'm running for. So a lot of them have very good ideas of what are student-oriented problems regarding academic policies right now, and things adjacent to academic policies, things related to equity and problems around that on our campus, and loads of other things that need to be improved. My role as VPOF, and the way I really see it, is making sure our organization is in the position to be able to support our fantastic student advocates, our student volunteers, our student workers in doing the best thing for the people around them. My job as VPOF really is to empower others to do the really great work that our campus needs.
All right, thank you so much. Great answer. So in addition to sort of your more general goals, do you have any specific goals for your time in the role?
Yeah, I've got a number of things that I wanted to focus on that I'm sure plenty of people have seen on my social channels. But sort of in that vein of supporting students, that's the thing that I want to focus on most. The way I see it, the biggest thing, the most successful thing I need to do is just be there for students. So that includes, I'm going to make sure I have a 24-hour email policy. If you email me with any problem, it could be related to healthcare, it could be related to anything, you're going to get a response from me within a day. I know how important that is to students, and I realize that if we're not there for students, if WUSA isn't there for students, then no one is. So that's one of the big things that I'm focusing on. In more of the backgrounds, inner workings of the organization, it's value for student money is one of the big things that I see as important. WUSA is a large organization, and we've got our fingers in a lot of different pies. But I think it's important that we do have that. We run so many different services and negotiate so many different deals to make students' lives better. So I don't think it makes any sense to commit to spending lots of money or to commit to spending little amount of money. It's focusing on value for student money. I'm going to make sure that every decision that we're making from a Spanish perspective, it's about making sure that the dollar that students spend on our fee, it gets them somewhere, gets something for them.
Wonderful. Just adding on to kind of the question that we asked for, what are the biggest challenges that you foresee for your position, and how do you plan on overcoming them?
Of course. So as I said before, WUSA it's a big organization, and there's a lot of different moving pieces. And the consequence of that is that it's really hard for one person to be able to make a huge amount of change. There's so many different departments that do so many different things, different groups that are at different levels of independence from the organization. So it makes it really hard for one person to enact change and make things different. So one of the biggest hurdles, which I'm very excited to take on, is going to be connecting with different people across the organization, so that it's not just me, it's not just my successors that are dealing with trying to make this organization a better place. but it's making sure that everybody has an investment in the organization, and everyone, leaders, workers, volunteers across the organization, all have a sense of what it's going to take to move us forward and make us better.
Thank you so much. So obviously, the COVID-19 pandemic has caused a lot of changes to how WUSA, amongst pretty much everything else on campus, is run. How will you ensure that WUSA and all of the businesses that you encompass continue to succeed even while campus is remote?
So there's a lot of different parts of WUSA, and we do different things. So it's going to take a bit of a specific strategy for a lot of different parts of the organization. When it comes to things like our student services, that comes down to finding the best way to adapt our operations to best serve students. WUSA has a bunch of different services that all have different mandates, and they've been created because we found out, hey, students need this kind of service. And by and large, they still need these services. If they're equity-seeking services, support services, even the bike service still has a place when we're online. So for these, in each of these cases, we've got to take their operations and move them online in the best way we can. Some of them have already done really good jobs at running online events and having peer mentorship, drop-in hours for support and other things, and it's continuing that kind of work. When it comes to other parts of our organization, like our commercial operations, our businesses, those ones are a little bit more difficult because it's kind of hard to buy something from a restaurant or a store if no one's around here in Waterloo. So it comes down to figuring out, okay, which commercial operations can operate, which ones can students still access. Right now with stay-at-home orders, that's a little bit more difficult. But as we're seeing things open up a little bit more and go through the next year, it's going to be opening them up as soon as it's viable to do so, and so we can just provide the max amount of services to students.
Amazing. As you mentioned, a lot of WUSA services have gone online. What will you do to ensure that WUSA is as efficient as possible in its operations?
Of course. So one thing that WUSA, I think, is trying to, but also needs some support in doing, and we need to continue pushing on, is making sure we're taking advantage best of the tools we have access to. So that's helping train all of our volunteers, our employees, our workers, everyone, on how to best use these tools, because sometimes we're only used to using them from one end as students attending lectures, or in some cases we aren't used to using these tools at all. And people are generally pretty good at figuring out software, but there's always little things that that can help make our services sort of go to 11 and really do a better job. So we're going to be certainly focusing on making sure that everyone understands the best way to use these online services, but also taking a look at how other student societies across the province or the country are using different online services to figure out new ways that we can use services, or new systems we can use to support students while we're online.
Thank you. So this is our final question. How will you work to ensure that WUSA's operations start to become more sustainable and eventually carbon neutral?
Thanks so much. I was hoping something like that would come up, because sustainability is a big thing across our team. It's something you're going to hear come up. That's something that we really want to focus on. This is certainly something that our VPSL wants to focus on a lot, but as I said, I'm here to support everybody. So one of the big things looking at WUSA, as we are online right now, but as we transition back to in-person on-campus operations, we're going to be restarting a lot of things that we were doing for a long time, but that now we put on pause because we're online and not able to have these operations anymore. Things like orientation, different kinds of events, just about everything that WUSA does in person, we're gonna have to restart. And in the process of doing that, we have a really good chance to take a hard look at our operations and how we do things. And hey, if we were starting from the ground up, which we now have the chance to do, how can we actually do this more sustainably? How can we just create less incidental waste? How can we make sure that this involves less transportation waste, fewer carbon emissions, use materials that are more sustainable if we still need to use materials? There's going to be so many different chances at which we get to consider this. So the big answer is we're going to be considering that at every turn. Every decision to be made in reopening our campus, our operations, is going to consider how can we do better than we've ever done before.
Great answer. Thank you for answering all of our questions. Is there anything else you would like to add?
Not a huge amount. I'm just so excited to be up here and have this candidacy. I hope that if anybody has any questions about my platform, it's available on duckduck.ca, where we have all of our candidate platforms. But if anyone has any questions about stuff on the platform, stuff not on the platform, their specific circumstances, things that are important to them, I'm always happy to hear about that. That's why I'm here. So I hope that anybody that's interested reaches out and we can have a great chat.
Thank you again. All right, next up we have our VPSL, or the Vice President of Student Life. So the Vice President of Student Life maintains and improves undergrad student life here at Waterloo by overseeing WUSA's student-run services and clubs, working closely with the Campus Life Department and overseeing orientation. The VPSL also represents UW undergraduate students on university committees and really advocates for equity, inclusion, and diversity at the University of Waterloo. So could our candidate for VPSL please come up and tell us your name, your program, and your year?
Hi, can you all hear me all right? Okay, cool. Hi, my name is Catherine. I'm in I believe it's the third year of math right now here at University of Waterloo. I've been here for a couple of years now, and I've gotten the chance to be involved in a lot of different levels of student governance and volunteering, and I'm really excited to be here and have this opportunity to speak to you all about what I really think the VPSL portfolio should be focusing on and why I'm excited to take it on.
All right, well, can you start us off by telling us why you chose to run and what skills you think you bring to this position?
For me in particular, the VPSL portfolio is honestly just really close to my heart. Services and clubs have been a really big part of my experience here. They've made me, they've helped campus feel like home. I've been in a cappella, and I've had the chance to work within services and work on developing the WUSA secondhand clothing store, for instance. And those, I think, are really important parts of both working within them and receiving the benefits of them, are really important parts of the student experience here. Learning is a core part of why we come to university, but that doesn't mean that we should be casting aside this important part of finding community and making those connections and valuable opportunities to learn about what you care about. So I want to make sure that we are giving that all of the due attention that it deserves, to make sure that we can be keeping that student life portfolio on track and keep it evolving with the times to cater to our students as we grow. The experience that I'm bringing here is I've since my 1A term, I've been involved in student governance and volunteering. I started out in Math Soc like Matthew, as a counselor and director, and overall just volunteering around, office manager, executive assistant, and filling in for executive roles. And that's where I started to branch into WUSA as well. So I've been a student counselor as well since my first year. And in particular, I sit on the internal administration committee as well as the campus life advisory committee, which are both committees that fall under the VPSL portfolio already, which is part of how I got involved with a better understanding of what the actual VPSL role looks like, and why I'm very certain that it's a portfolio that I feel comfortable getting my hands dirty with and really doing everything I can in it. I've, through all these experiences, I've had the opportunity to really build a skill set in communication and problem solving, and that sort of knowledge base that comes with involvement and experience in governance, and just how to work with people and collaborate to get the most out of a situation for everybody.
Thank you so much. You mentioned your passion for the role. Just adding on to this, what goals do you have for your time in your role?
The biggest thing that really stands out to me are my goals of increasing awareness and action surrounding sustainability and equity. Those are really big issues right now. They are really, I think, defining issues of our generation. And there's a lot that WUSA can be doing. There isn't enough attention being drawn to these. They deserve more of a spotlight than we're giving them. And we have the time and resources and possibility to make an impact here. We have a lot of students here at the University of Waterloo, and so there's a lot that I think we can do. my three biggest goals that I generally outline are sort of integrating sustainability and equity throughout all of WUSA. So that means reinvesting in our sustainability project, taking a proper look at investigating WUSA's carbon footprint to identify where we can improve, and then implementing those improvements, and committing to the recommendations of our current equity review, as well as consulting and actively communicating with marginalized groups on campus to make sure that we are implementing those changes that need to happen to make sure that it's a safe and equitable place for everybody. People shouldn't be getting less out of their time here just because of their race or their gender or their sexual orientation. That's not acceptable. So we have to be addressing that. I want to make sure we're really investing in the support and guidance and resources for our student groups, clubs and services and societies, as well as informal groups, even though they're not under WUSA. Those are really the heart of what gives WUSA, how WUSA reaches its students. Clubs are how most of the students at Waterloo get involved with WUSA, even if they don't think of them as WUSA. Clubs are so important, and I want to make sure that we're giving them all that support. I want to make sure that students who have spent a lot of time online aren't missing out. I want to make sure that once they get back on campus, they aren't held back from opportunities for leadership just because they feel like they have to catch back up on being on campus or something. I want to make sure they can jump right back in to what it's like to be a student on campus. Another big thing is right now our services, they need support. I want to make sure that we're actively working with them to get them the support that they need, that they get proper sort of personalized support and communication to help them achieve their goals. Right now, WUSA has begun the process of looking into a fee review, so I want to make sure that we are keeping all perspectives on the table to make sure that, again, nothing's tossed to the side and that everything is supported the way that it needs to be.
Right. What are some of the big challenges that you foresee for this position and for those goals, and how do you plan to overcome those challenges?
One thing that definitely struck me as a student, even before I was looking at the VPSL role, is just how polarized and scary things get, with it feeling like older people aren't listening to us, and the government and the university aren't listening to us, and the people in charge just aren't listening to what we need. So I want to make sure that the VPSL portfolio is a place where students can feel heard and feel like they're being supported when they're pushing for the change that we need. I want to make sure that we are facilitating those meaningful connections, because right now I think that online it's really hard for a student not to feel isolated, honestly. So I want to make sure that once we're back on campus, we can, like I said, jump right back into all the value that being on campus, being surrounded by students like ourselves provides to people. And especially right now, while we're still in this unfortunate but unique circumstance of being remote, I want to make sure that we are giving that sort of unique support that clubs and other student groups need to connect students best as we can. Because again, it's all those little branches at the end of the WUSA tree that really connect all students.
Thank you so much. You mentioned supporting students as one of your biggest goals. If elected, how would you combat racism against and advocate for Black students, Indigenous students, and other students of color?
Obviously, I can't speak to all experiences. I only have one very, very small slice of the pie of understanding what it's like to be in any amount of marginalized community. So it's going to be a lot of not discounting voices that have personally experienced their own lives. It's going to be making sure that we are actively including those voices in conversations where they will be affected. There will certainly be, in terms of, we know that recently there was a really just unacceptable incident at a recent event. And that type of stuff should not be happening. We can do our best to prevent it from happening, but in light of when it does happen, there should be, strict enforcement, ideally consequences to show that it's not acceptable behavior. If misconduct is happening, people should be removed from events, asked to leave, and possibly in the future not permitted to attend again because they pose a danger to students, if not their physical well-being, their mental well-being, and that matters. Combating racism and all other forms of discrimination on campus means that we shouldn't be discounting anybody, any of their stories just because we haven't experienced them ourselves. So it's going to be a lot of working with students on campus to make sure that what they are experiencing is accounted for when we're making decisions about how to better support them.
Yeah, so just adding on to what you mentioned about the misconduct at a recent event, that was the RAISE event. RAISE is an essential service as classified by WUSA and attested to by the racialized students who access their services. Do you agree that RAISE is essential? Will you commit to protecting RAISE coordinators and volunteers from the white supremacist violence targeted against them?
Absolutely, 100%. I know that there's been a lot of discourse online on different platforms, and I think that each individual platform is not a good representative cross-section of our campus. The conversations you see on different platforms, I truly hope does not represent what our overall student body believes. And I hope that we can all agree that the work that RAISE does is essential to students. This term, I've specifically made an effort to volunteer with RAISE to make sure that I can really understand from the inside what kind of support they need, so that I'm not coming at from a one-sided perspective once I'm VPSL. I want to make sure that RAISE is protected because it's a desperately needed service, especially in light of how the university itself is failing to provide students with that kind of support. If the university isn't going to do it, we have to. So there's no question, RAISE is essential.
Thank you so much for that answer. Our next question is a little bit less directly related, but I know that you've mentioned orientation and helping students integrate back into campus life or helping new students integrate in. So I guess, could you reiterate, how will you work to ensure that the upcoming orientation is a positive experience for students, whether it's remote or in person? And how will you help students who started remotely integrate onto campus and into campus life once they're here?
I think that a big part of it will be reaching out and connecting with people with past experience, so people who have both run successful in-person orientations as well as remote ones, to understand what worked for them and what didn't work for them. Because, you know, as much as I've been involved, I've never run my own orientation, so I should be speaking to the people who have. And really building on top of those structures to see what is important to students, trying to evaluate what is important and what we should, you know, maybe be putting aside for something that's more meaningful. I don't know what orientation is going to look like this year, and I don't think that either you or anybody on this call does either, which is really unfortunate. But that's at least one ocean that we're all in right now. Different boats on the same ocean, they say. But it's something that I've been really actively trying to communicate with people on to get a better idea of what I can do to make it a meaningful experience in terms of helping students integrate onto campus. For a really alarming number of students, it's going to be their first time on campus. I remember my first time on campus not knowing how to get anywhere, and it is really unfortunate to see that students are going to be having that experience halfway into their degree. So I want to make sure that as best as possible, we can connect students with people who they can lean back on to make sure that they still get that sort of not quite mentorship, but that sort of guidance from older students who have been on campus for longer. Hopefully they can connect with students who are excited to be back on campus. So I really hope that students, older students, will be excited to show younger students around campus. That's something that I have a lot of faith in. I have a lot of faith in the fact that we all want to get back on campus, and we want to be there as much as possible for people who are getting to be on campus for the first time.
Thank you. How will you work to support campus Indigenous student initiatives and ensure that students feel safe and represented at UW?
a big part is going to be taking concerns seriously. I'm not 100% sure of what those interactions look like right now because I haven't been part of them. But I know that I personally will be committing to, I and my team are committing to taking all of those concerns, complaints, questions, everything, suggestions seriously, and really looking into how we can implement strategies and solutions to problems as they're identified. We'll be doing our part as best as we can in identifying and proactively looking for those gaps ourselves. But unfortunately, sometimes it's hard to see them when you don't trip into them yourself. So we're going to be working hard to make sure that we're hearing other people's identifications of them so that we can implement solutions together.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for answering all of our questions. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
I don't have anything hugely, I think, new. I really appreciate all those questions. I think that they were really insightful. Thanks so much for having us today. And I guess just if you want to learn more, duckduck.ca/VPSL is where I do my best to break down my platform points more. And you can always reach me by email, catherine.dong@uwaterloo.ca. Thanks.
All right, thank you so much. So next up, we have our candidate for the VP Education position. So the VP Education helps students with both academic and co-op issues, which includes assisting students with navigating the co-op process and lobbying the university administration to improve the academic services that we have available on campus. The VP Education also lobbies the city, provincial, and federal governments to help undergraduate students have a better experience and to help UW students access higher quality education. So could the candidate for VP Education please introduce yourself, tell us your name, your program, and your year.
Oops. Okay, I muted myself. Hi, my name's Stephanie Mo. I'm running to be your next VP Education. I'm currently in my 4th year of knowledge integration in the Faculty of Environment.
Thank you for introducing yourself. Why did you choose to run, and what experience and skills do you bring to the position?
So, how do I explain this? So I think the first thing that really comes to mind is that I'm a transfer student. I left my previous university because I had a particularly rough first year, and for me, the University of Waterloo in many ways represented kind of a second chance, a chance to get to redo this whole university experience, which represents like a big step in your life. And I get a lot of benefit from it. I look around and I see my peers involved in extracurriculars and classes, and I see the way that it changes people. I've seen people from, my high school become a lot more sure of themselves and confident, and that's something that I, appreciate so much. And I think in order for all of this work to happen, it relies on the work and knowledge of volunteers, of elected individuals, of, just participants of events, of our classmates, of part-time workers. This entire thing runs because we're all playing our own unique parts in it. And, for whatever reason, I found that my skill set kind of revolved around advocacy and problem solving, in knowing how to talk with different, entities, like the dean's office, with different organizations that all have differing goals. And, that was something that I was good at, and I did good in that, I guess, or at least I hope so. And sometimes it's really hard work. Sometimes in the advocacy work that I'm doing, particularly in regards to accessibility, it brings up some traumatic experiences and whatnot. But I think in me doing this and me putting myself out there and voicing all these things that, I'm helping change this institution that means a lot to me. I've had a lot of great role models who've, been brave in their own different ways and left their own marks on this institution. So I really hope to leave my own mark, but also, I guess, be a good role model and be a good example for, all the other folks who are simultaneously role models for me, but, I'm acting as a role model for them too. I think that's really important. So, I really want to do my best in this position.
Thank you so much for sharing. Can you tell us about some of your specific goals for your time in this role?
So there are two goals that I see as most important. One of them is remaining responsive to the current pandemic situation. It's definitely changed how education is facilitated. It's changed co-op. It's changed, student housing situations. Some people are stuck at home and maybe not so great home environments. It's distracting. Like there's a lot of things being thrown at us, and a lot of students who are now left in precarious positions. And we have to respond quickly to that. While everything's still relevant, making sure that any misfortune that occurs that we limit that. I guess like one example that I think strongly of, and I'd like to commend, the person who really drew attention to this, but with regards to proctoring spyware, that was a huge issue that I think went over a lot of our heads, not understanding, what kind of data we were giving these companies, how, for some reason, apparently, if you were a racialized student, it was more likely to kind of ping you of suspicious behavior. So you'd be pinged for policy 71, which also wouldn't be great. Like there were a lot of risk involved in that, someone was able to pick up, and I'm really glad that that happened. And there's all these other cases that are happening with regards to this. Some people don't think about how students are, in toxic home situations, or maybe they don't have the appropriate bandwidth to access their classes. We have to be thinking about all these students who are in wildly different positions right now, and we have to work really quickly to do that. So one of my goals is to remain responsive to that. Another one that is really important to me is kind of advancing the work of what the Student Accessibility Commission is doing currently. So it means a lot to me personally, because I've been involved in WUSA for quite some time now. And I go into these meetings and I only provide one perspective of disability and my experiences, but I'm constantly the one pointing out like some issues in the system, and I realize that if I wasn't there, that wouldn't be recognized. And I'm wondering, I guess, like, we do advocacies for so many other things. Why are we failing in this aspect? So one of my biggest goals, and bringing my lived experiences, I guess, to the forefront, is making sure that, we develop a strategic plan for that moving forward, making sure that, we understand the various barriers that students of all different sorts of disabilities experience on campus, and that we develop strategies to address that. I think it's time that WUSA begins taking responsibility for that, in the same way that we've taken responsibility, or at least we're trying to, for racialized students, for LGBTQ plus students. So that's something that I'm really looking forward to advancing.
Thank you. What are the biggest challenges you foresee in the position, and how do you plan on overcoming them?
So I guess the two biggest challenges that I see, predominantly, COVID-19 really mucked things up. There's a lot of entities that we have to deal with, a lot of quick decisions that were made by the university without much student consultation. Like, it's going to be a lot of work, especially when we eventually transition back to an in-campus environment. Not everyone's going to be able to come back as a result of being, immunocompromised or some other extenuating circumstances, maybe regarding student visas or whatnot. So making sure that, we're keeping track of all of these things that are going on. But I guess more into like a general matter is that, I guess both my portfolio and Catherine's portfolio interact a lot with, diverse circumstances, and a lot of identifying where the problems come from. They're from, you learn this out of lived experience. You think that systems work until, you need help from a system and it doesn't work. And, I've had my share of hardships, but that doesn't represent the entire body of hardships that we've all experienced as students. So, I'm only coming with my point of view, but there are going to be blind spots. And I need to make sure that as a leader that I'm capturing all those things. And I think particularly since, we're talking about BIPOC students, a lot of what they encounter, reiterating that is traumatic. It's hard. But it's something that, is necessary to do to begin understanding these problems. So I think that's going to be a really, difficult process, engaging in consultation, collecting those experiences, but also being respectful for the fact that these students have been, saying these things for a while, and it's just getting exhausting for them. And I don't think that is necessarily fair that they have to bear that burden. But simultaneously, I think it's the best way to move forward and create a better university environment. I think you're muted, or I'm just...
Sorry. Yeah, my computer is being ridiculously
sorry.
slow. No, it's okay. Should be good. Could you tell us about how WUSA will advocate for or dealing with both OSAP and tuition payment changes during the pandemic?
So with regards to OSAP, something that I'm really hoping for, but apparently we haven't heard anything back because of the way that the government budget cycles work, is I really want the continuation of the double federal grants. That's something that, I think was really helpful for a lot of students. And, we're still in the context of a pandemic, so that would be really, really nice to secure. Beyond that, other aspects of OSAP, I would very much like the government. Sorry, let me collect my thoughts for a second. There's a lot of things to yell at the government about. Yeah. So. Oh yeah. With regards to the accruing of interest, basically pausing that in a similar way that it was paused earlier, kind of in fall, so that, students who are facing a very difficult job market, or students who, decided to take a break because online learning was really difficult to them, that they're not, massively accruing interest during this period, which makes it, really hard to pay off. There's a matter of kind of addressing the decision that the Ford government made earlier regarding, where they cut 10% off tuition, but simultaneously they didn't provide government grants or any way for the university to really, make up that budget that was already kind of planned into everything, which resulted in the university becoming incredibly stingy, which then resulted in, international tuition, which is unregulated, going up, which you know, I think that when you apply like a 10% tuition cut unilaterally, you're not really helping the students who are most in need. So there's a lot of components of these things at play, and just some of the things that I mentioned are ways, I guess, in order to improve kind of the student loan system in the context of the pandemic, and more broadly as well.
Thank you so much. You mentioned the difficulty in the job market. Getting quality co-op jobs can be a challenge in some programs. How will you work to ensure that co-op education is consistently finding relevant jobs for all programs?
That's a very good question. And unfortunately, I'm not in co-op, which makes it even more complicated, I guess, for me to answer this. I guess a lot of it is, I guess, building relationships with different firms, I think, is the direction that SICA is going for. Kind of creating positions that, you know, are suitable for students, but aren't, say, I've seen examples of, like, you can be a manager at a paintball place, or you can be a camp counselor. Those are a lot of jobs that show up for environment students, particularly, that aren't super relevant to the work in which they do. So I guess a huge part would be, you know, encouraging the university to, you know, expand the amounts of relevant jobs to the faculties that have usually been not the top attention of the university. I think the direction that the university has gone regarding flexible co-ops, different kinds of work experiences, because the job market is definitely evolving, and we're seeing a lot of jobs that don't represent your typical, you know, 9-to-5 type situation. So, you know, considering those as co-ops as well, I think allows people to gain work experience, allows people to understand the work economy as well, and be kind of adaptive and flexible to that. Another thing, although I really need to catch up on where that's currently at, but to my knowledge, there's some instances of, like, international co-ops, even if they're remote, students aren't allowed to take and have count for co-op credits because of supposed COVID-19 reasons. So ideally, you know, getting these international co-ops that, you know, are safe because they're occurring remotely, having those count as well, I think would really help increase the ability of students to get co-op positions. And I guess, on one final note, I know the federal government has the Canada Works program, which essentially they offer grants to companies that are able to create positions for people within the age group of 18 to 30. So, you know, I've been poking around there. I've been, like, showing my friends a lot of jobs there. They seem to be fairly good jobs, to my understanding. So I'm really hoping to get the Canadian government to invest more in that. But I also just want to take, I guess, like, a closer look at that system and see how well that's actually working.
Thank you so much for answering all of our questions. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, thank you so much for giving us this opportunity to speak with you guys. Thank you for explaining our positions ahead of time to the student body. That's really helpful, I find, less talking for me at least. And yeah, if you're interested to find more details, please visit our website, which is fantastically named, duckdoc.ca. If you have any things you want to share with me, any questions, any dank memes, please send them my way. I will love them. It will make me smile. Yeah, thanks so much.
Thank you so much. Okay, so lastly, we are happy to welcome our candidate for president of WUSA. So the president of WUSA is the CEO of the corporation, and they represent undergrad students to the university administration, to the Senate and the Board of Governors, and they're also responsible for overseeing all aspects of student government. The president also provides leadership and oversight to WUSA and WUSA clubs. They chair several WUSA committees, and they sit on high-level university committees, such as the President's Advisory Committee on Mental Health. So essentially, they represent WUSA. So could our candidate for president please introduce themselves? Please tell us your name, your program, and your year.
Hi, everybody. I'm Ben. I'm in 4B economics, and I'm taking a French minor.
Thank you. And could you tell us about why you chose to run and what experiences and skills you think you bring to this position?
Sure. So in my, I guess, 5 years at Waterloo, I've been something of a WUSA lifer. My experience with the organization started after my 1B term when I started as a student counselor from a different faculty, but that's another story. So I served on Students' Council for a year, and I was fortunate to get involved with the Education Advisory Committee, or what became the Education Advisory Committee, which was really my first exposure to the advocacy work that is integral to what WUSA does. And my experience with that group inspired me to apply to be the Municipal Affairs Commissioner the following year, where I worked as basically an advocate under the Vice President Education to local governments. So I sat on several committees at the city level and advocated things like, for example, I ran an educational program for tenants to learn about the Ontario Standard Lease, which was introduced in, I believe it was January of 2019. So promoting tenants' rights and things like that, and really gained useful experience rather for me as an advocate that I benefited by that. In the winter term that I was serving as Municipal Affairs Commissioner, the Ford government introduced the Student Choice Initiative, which was essentially an attempt to union bust and put the future of our student association in a bit of jeopardy. And I decided that the best place to continue to serve WUSA was at the Board of Governors level, the Board of Directors, pardon me. So I've been a director for the past 2 years. In my first term, I was the corporate secretary, where I learned a lot about the behind-the-scenes governance issues that we deal with all the time. And this year, I'm very fortunate to have been elected chair of the board. So even more of the, dirty governance issues. So I think that this sort of breadth of experience across the organization, as a representative, as an advocate, and as a director, working, in the interests of the organization, sort of in the longer term than a representative does. I think this breadth of experience is really what qualifies me to be the president, and that's why I'm very excited to have the opportunity to be a candidate.
Thank you so much. What goals do you have for your time in the role?
Thanks. So, as you may have guessed from my rant about governance, governance reform is what interests me in particular. I don't know how many of the students on the call have had the chance to look through our governing documents, but I suspect that it's very few. And basically what you need to know is that it's hundreds of pages of information that even after 4 years of working with WUSA, they still confuse me, which in my vision of governance, I don't see this. So governance reform is the first point. Next is advocacy to the university on establishing an independent ombudsperson office. So currently, WUSA runs the Center for Academic Policy Support, under the VP Education portfolio, where we support students with academic policy grievances and so on. But really, that WUSA is doing it is good, but it shouldn't be our responsibility. Like, the university should be stepping up and helping students with these academic policy issues, particularly in light of their lack of willingness to help students with compassionate grading and no credit options. That really only leaves us as students with the ability to grieve. But that's like a lot of work for a student to do. So advocating an office independent of the university to support students in that process is my top advocacy priority facing the university. And my third priority is advocacy to the University Board of Governors on divestment from fossil fuels. Obviously, my teammates have talked about sustainability within WUSA and what we can control, but sustainability is the issue of our time, and it demands action.
All right, thank you so much. So what do you think are some of the biggest challenges that might come in your position, and how do you plan to overcome these challenges?
Thanks. So I'm going to kind of cheat and do maybe two answers to that. The first challenge, particularly with these governance questions, is, WUSA is its own little bureaucracy. Like, we have a lot of moving parts. There are many different parts of the organization that all need to agree for change to happen. So I think that will be a challenge, but I'm hopeful that the breadth of experience across our team can help to address that. And working with Students' Council, working with the board of directors to enact changes that help our organization into the future. And then maybe a more personal response for a challenge that I imagine we will all face in our year in office is burnout. It's maybe not a popular answer to a political debate where I'm asking for you to vote for me, but I know the students who are in executive office right now, it's a lot of work. This organization demands a lot from people, and that's not just true of the executives. That's true down to the services, the coordinators and executives, and all volunteers across the breadth of what we do. And I don't know, it's a huge challenge to how do you deal with burnout? It seems ubiquitous in our time, but so maybe I don't have a satisfactory answer, but it's something that's definitely on my mind.
Thank you so much. What will you do to address racism at UW?
That's a great question. And I should acknowledge that I don't have the experience of a racialized student. And so I think that addressing, first, it requires an acknowledgement that white supremacy is alive and well in our communities and on campus. And supporting groups like RAISE is essential to creating safe spaces for BIPOC students, and allowing students to organize and talk about issues like environmental racism and racism on campus is vital in helping to combat that. One thing that we can do internal to WUSA is commit to implementing the recommendations of the equity audit that's going on right now, which is that's something that we can control. So that's something that I look forward to doing. But really, I'm aware of the irony of me as a white person talking about how I'm going to beat racism. So I guess listening is how I can help to address that.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we do recognize that a lot of these questions are asking you to listen to and work with different groups and people on campus. And so it's important that we have a commitment to do that. But how do you plan on welcoming students to campus, both if the orientation and the next term are remote, and also as students begin to come back to campus in person?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one idea that I hope is like maybe working with orientation staff to look at how can we allow students who missed out on the opportunity for an on-campus orientation to sort of opt in, and maybe having some modified programming, because somebody in their third year is gonna expect something different, but at the same time they haven't had that experience on campus. So working with staff who actually think about these problems is, I think, an important piece to solving this and providing like satisfactory programming for students who have had the misfortune of missing out on what is for a lot of people a great memory of university in O Week.
Okay, thank you. What will you do to ensure that WUSA is operating as efficiently as possible?
Well, I guess it depends on how you define efficiency. That's my econ nerd. But I think governance reform is a big part as to how that can be addressed. So one sort of sub point under governance reform that I have in mind is establishing committee mandates for all the committees of Students' Council, to say, like, is it necessary that this committee exists? Is this work being duplicated elsewhere? Are we just increasing checks for the sake of having a process when it may not be beneficial for the functioning of the organization as a whole? So I think governance is sort of my response to efficiency in the organization.
So I know that everyone who's spoken today has mentioned their commitment to sustainability and the environment, and I believe that sort of encouraging UW to divest from fossil fuels is a part of your official platform. Can you tell us about some of the steps you will take to make sure that UW lives up to their sustainable and environmental commitments?
So if I'm elected president, that gives me a seat at the Board of Governors and in the Senate. I've thought about running for a seat on the Senate Finance Committee, and being in. I maybe step back a little bit. I think a lot of when we look at these questions of activism, there's a lot of working within the system or without the system. And groups like Fossil Free UW, for example, do a lot of great organizing outside of the system. What a WUSA president can do is sort of complement that work inside of these decision-making bodies. So I think being a voice at the table and saying this is what students demand, and these are urgent issues, is how I can contribute to the work that other groups are doing as well.
Thank you for answering all of our questions. Is there anything else you'd like to
add? I don't really think so. I guess shout out duck.ca. And thanks so much for having us. It was a great opportunity to get to know the people on the bottom of my screen, I guess. Thanks again.
Thank you. And thank you so much to all of the executive candidates and all of our viewers today. Voting begins on Tuesday, February 2nd and ends on Thursday, February 4th. And to vote, go to vote.wusa.ca, and all you need is your Waterloo email address to log in. So that concludes the debate today. Thank you everyone for joining us. And once again, a huge thank you to our executive candidates.